Hello, everyone. I see people are starting to come in. Welcome to the Alberta Library Student Symposium. As people stream in, I'm just going to talk a little bit about TAL, give a little bit of an introduction. I want to say thank you to all the panelists here for giving your time and your expertise to help all of these lovely, exciting, bright new students for getting it, like talking about jobs interviews, it can be scary. Sometimes you get conflicting information. So it's going to be nice to have a whole bunch of different perspectives that will hopefully converge, but also share unique things. A little bit about TAL. So that's the Alberta Library. That's where I work. I'm the infrastructure librarian there. It's a library consortium. And if you don't know what a consortium is, it's a nonprofit that is member driven that basically works to support libraries all across Alberta. We have special library members, we have public library members, and we also have academic members. And actually, everybody on this panel is working at a TAL member institution, which is pretty cool. Um, we help with like licensing deals, making sure that licensing for digital products can be cheaper because we try to get them for more people. We help with accounting, we help with training, that kind of thing. Um, Canada is also special in that we have a national consortium called Consortia Canada. Descriptive name. I love it. Um, all right. So, yeah, we got a fair amount of attendees here. So I will just do the housekeeping part. So again, thank you panelists for being here. The panelists are going to speak for the first half of this event. They all have about 8 minutes to speak. They're going to answer a suite of questions that I gave them. So you'll kind of hear similar things and different things. Please, if you have any questions, use the Q&A feature. And while one speaker is talking, other speakers, you can interact in the chat or interact in the Q&A, take time to answer things because I also have questions to ask that were submitted via form ahead of time. So if you can answer questions while you're waiting, that's great. This session is being recorded. It is going to be sent to anyone who registered, and I'm also just going to put it out on Jerome and things like that again. If you need subtitles, you can do that. It's at the bottom. There's a show captions option, so that's there. Yeah, so that's pretty much everything. So let's start. And Weiwei, you are number one.
Thanks, Cole, for the introduction, and thanks for having me as part of this symposium. Graduated from SLIS in 2003. I can't believe it was 22 years ago. I totally understand kind of the anxiety as a student who comes through this journey. My entire career is in academic library, so I won't be able to speak much about other sectors, but I know other people here in the panel are more experienced in those areas. I'm the Associate University Librarian at the University of Alberta. My portfolio, including metadata strategy, cataloging strategy, library technology and applications, UX, assessment, communication, and some strategic partnership as well. I know it's a big kind of mixed pot of things. That's how the AUL positions are designed at the UFA. We all have the same job descriptions and we shuffle our responsibilities once in a while. That is not very common in the workplace though. So as I noted earlier, I came from China in 2003 for the Master of Libraries and Information Sciences. So I got my degree at UFA. Before that, I was a major in Management Information Systems. So that is computing, a little bit computing science, a little bit business, a little bit of everything. So I had some experience in information technology before my library degree. And I very soon realized that after my arrival in Canada, I'm in a program that most people have humanities, social sciences related background, and already have a very high standard ability in areas require a lot of writing and communication skills. So I know when English is not my first language, I don't have the competitive strengths in that space with my classmates and my peers. I need to focus on what's my strengths. In terms of my career path, I landed a web assistance job with UOL. and work with a team. And early days of UL's digitization program, when I was doing my master's, it was not a really traditional kind of public-facing job at the time, but opened doors for me. I then went into U of A. They had an internship program. Right now it's called resident program. After my graduation, that was my first real library experience ever, working on the service desk with faculty consultations, collection development. I actually didn't get to complete my internship because I moved to TAL in 2005, working as application librarian and support several digital applications TAL managed at the time, like Easy Proxy and SFX, and some part of TAL Online back in the days. I rejoined UFA in 2011, and that at that time was as a digital initiative applications librarian, but the doors just or the opportunity continued to rise. I started to do some supervisory opportunities. And then in 2020, I moved to the associate university librarian, kind of pursuing a few leadership related programs. And this is something I do wanted to talk to the kind of people here. There are kind of those library-focused career development programs, both in Canada and beyond. So those could be good opportunities for you to pursue if this is the area that you're interested in. So Cole do have a list of questions that have been sent to us. So the first question is really regarding for what have I learned over my experience best for interviews. Kind of all sorts of tips that I can share. So several things I think I do prepare for interviews. One is to really do research and understand the position you're applying for. Do your homework even before you put in your application. You really read the language in their job post. What do they really highlight? You look for their strategic plans of the organization, maybe their priorities if they're available online, maybe some recent kind of project initiatives, communications that they have shared in the public space. Using those language that the interviewer or the people who are recruiting that very familiar ways from that job post, from their own communication, from their strategic documents that you can find in your application can really show kind of a way of you've done your research, you understand their priorities, but you can also align your own interests and strength. So, the job interview or the jobs kind of looking for a new position is really a mutual kind of you're looking for the fit. So they're looking for something new. You're also looking for something in that organization. So you're really doing some of those alignment with your own interest, your expectations, kind of what can potentially help with your future growth because of that alignment. So do that research, I think, is really very, very important, kind of critical to really see that alignment, but also help you to prepare in your application process. In terms during the interview, I think it's just always feel confident that you can ask for pause, ask for repeat your questions. Don't be afraid of doing any of those. Take your time to take notes. You can always repeat back to confirm if that's what they're looking for. You can ask for feedback after you complete some part of your answering. You know that the interviewers already scheduled the time with you. They already put a lot of effort, and this is not inexpensive process or activity. So they definitely want to get the best of you through all the questions. So you can take the time to find whatever you feel most confident that to prepare for those answers. So just don't be afraid to pause and ask for things, anything that you need. And like I said, it's never a bad idea to check back with interviewer to gauge their feedback. Did you actually address their questions? Is there anything else they wanted you to expand? It really shows that confident, that engagement. There's kind of open-mindedness when you're asking for feedback as well. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. I do have a few other things, but I know we have a long list of questions. And I'll just quickly say that, yeah, come with a list of reference that you're ready to go, follow up with the thank you notes. Those are just really kind of a courtesy of that interview process, but it shows your curiosity, shows your interest. Specific advice regarding resume and CVs, try not to use one generic ones for all your applications. I think that's what I have learned. You have to have, you basically tailor your CVs based on the job you plan to apply. You don't also need to include all the things you've done. You basically show the relevance and show the impact in your resume is more important than volume. So it is really true from my perspective, or when I was doing recruitment, people's attention when reviewing resume really is focusing on the first several kind of pages. So you highlight your most relevant job on the first or second page. Doesn't always have to follow a chronicle order, just whatever that is most relevant, that is important. And I can't say that enough. Do put some effort in your cover letter. I can't stress how important a good cover letter is. That is your executive summary of you, right? That is your elevator pitch. So put some more effort in that cover letter, not only just kind of as a letter to respond to that application, but use that as an opportunity to really showcase who are you and why you are interested in this opportunity. Advice for settling in during the first month for a new job. Hopefully the employer will already have an onboarding plan for you. Usually there is a 30 days or 90 days or some kind of planning for your initial activities. But if they don't, please ask for one. That you should clear the expectations with your supervisor. But what I think most important is really to reach out to connect with your peers, ask them out for coffee, establish relationship with them. Supervisor is great to provide you a high level information about what their expectations are, but it is really your peer that can offer the best vantage points of the position, of the challenges, of the things you needed to pay attention to help support you. So other than making sure that you have a conversation with your supervisor to really understand your 30-day, 90-day kind of expectations when you're starting this position, go out and talk to the people in the hallway and reach out for, like, if you feel a little bit shy, kind of set up individual time outside of these kind of working meeting time to introduce yourself and ask questions. I think everyone would be very happy to kind of introduce what they know to someone who is new to the position. So that's important. And then the next question is, what skills were the most helpful for early career library, like all the different programs? In many cases, from my experience, we're not necessarily looking for past experiences, but really to gauge the candidate's level of curiosity, their ability to learn, to make connections, really a demonstrated level of change in some way. So we always say that job-related skills can be trained, but the most important skill is really that curiosity, their adaptability, because our profession, as all the others, constantly evolving. But if we really are talking about some job-related skills, because I come from a more IT background, I would say try to explore how generative AI can be embedded in your interest line of work. Is a fast evolving area. So it's often said that AI will not replace the workforce, but the people who knows how to use AI may replace those who don't. So that will be my last words since my time is up, but happy to address any questions come from the chat while I pass to the next speaker.
Hi, my name is Sinisha Pugh. I'm an information specialist at the University of Calgary, Library and Cultural Resources, which is a mouthful, but the two main parts of my role are being on the public service team, providing reference interactions at our different service points, and then also supporting the library's research data management initiatives, including curating data that's deposited into our research or our data depository. Um, I have a library information technology diploma from SAIT that I got back in 2023. Before going into that program or working this job, I didn't have any library experience and I had very limited work experience. But I worked as a cashier in a fast food place before and during the SAIT program. And then that was pretty much most of my work experience. So I tried to get a variety of volunteer and extracurricular activities. So I was a Girl Guide leader for 2 years. I was part of the SAIT's Library Tech Club membership executive. And then I also took part in a community service learning project with SAIT's Study Abroad office. I also did my best to try and get an internship between my first and second year, and I got one in a records management position at an oil and gas company. So that kind of limited library work experience brings me into my advice for resumes. There's almost always a way you can relate your past experience to the role you're applying for, whether it's library related specifically or not. Just being able to frame it in your cover letter and your resume as how it applies to the library work you'd be doing is so important, will really give you a boost in the application process. People, especially in entry-level positions, aren't always looking for specifically library experience. If you have the tech diploma or if you have your MLIS, some practicums behind you, they know you have some of the knowledge and skills already. But a lot of what they're looking for is soft and transferable skills, kind of like Wei Wei was saying, problem solving, adaptability, teamwork, communication, organization, those kinds of things that aren't specific to libraries, but very, very relevant to libraries. For my interview advice, saving the job posting and highlighting keywords is good for resume cover letters, and then also generating some common interview questions that you might be asked related to the job posting. So think of some common interview questions or put the job posting through your generative AI of choice, not to mention AI for the second time already, but it's a great starting point. Um, and then you have some questions to work off of. Think and brainstorm of a list of experiences and stories for behavioral interview questions. I like to make sure that when I'm thinking of an answer or a story from my past work experience, I think of all the different skills that it's highlighting. So if one story highlights teamwork and problem-solving ability and communication skills, I practice highlighting different aspects of the story to suit questions for each of those skills. And that way I can be more adaptive and flexible when answering in the interview. And I don't have to think of as many examples of work experience and have them all up in my head. Um, I also would suggest practicing with friends and family for interviews. Just practicing with a person is so much better than practicing alone. If you can get them to ask you the questions that you've brainstormed, but also ask them to think of a question you didn't think of, and then you can practice being caught off guard and unprepared for a question. My only other interview advice would be kind of as like Wei Wei said, looking at recent events and news that the company has posted. I like to use them as small talking points to have in my back pocket if there's any small talk or at the beginning of the interview or transitional periods in the interview, especially if it's in person, walking up the stairs. It's nice to have a small talking point so you're a little bit less anxious about filling awkward silences. And you're about to do an interview, so you're already nervous. So to have that in your back pocket is just good. You can also take relevant library news. So I like to look at like the library journal because you get a certain amount of free articles for free. When I was prepping, I just kind of kept up the last few weeks. And then in my interview for this job, it ended up coming up, and I was like, oh, I read an article in the library journal about that. And I think that is just an opportunity to impress them beyond your questions, where other applicants might not. So, um, for advice for settling in during your first month, ask all your questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It shows an interest and willingness to learn, and people really appreciate good questions. It also just shows confidence that you're not afraid to ask them. I think we all recognize how hard it can be starting a new place and you don't know a lot. And we really appreciate when other people aren't afraid to voice that they don't know. Um, Also, when starting out, finding some quick win projects. If you can find a quick win short project, it really helps in showing you're engaged and committed to the job. And it gives you a small celebration moment, which can really help in momentum when you're being trained and you're learning all these new things, and it can be quite overwhelming. Having that momentum of a quick win can really help. It also just gives you a taste for the workflow for that role or the organization and what you might be looking at a bigger scale for a bigger project in the future. And then for skills that would be most helpful in early career in libraries, um, communication, just really good empathetic communicators. It's going to get you so far in library work or any job, really. Um, it's my job's relying on it for the public service aspect, but even if you're working just in a team or a small team or alone, you're still going to have to do that communication with people in your organization and sometimes outside of it. So communication skills are a great thing to just work on and to show in your resume or past experience. And then I just quickly wanted to add for advice on prep goals for those still in school. Um, Take full advantage of your practicums and internships or any side jobs you have related to libraries to just connect with people. I tried to set up as many meetings and coffee meetings with as many people as possible during my practicum and my internships. And even if you're not interested in their current role, they might have some really good past history, work history, or advice for finding work. So just connecting with as many people as possible, expanding your network. I had a practicum here at the University of Calgary before I got this job, and knowing all the people here really helped me in getting this position. And then I also had just people from my practicums and internships I had met with sending me job posting and referrals once I had graduated. So it can really help to expand your network like that. And I believe Kim was next, so I'll send it off to Kim.
Thank you, Sydney. So my name is Kim Giraldi. I also work at the University of Calgary with Sydney. I was one of those people Sydney set up a coffee chat with while she was a practicum student here, so it works. I'll give you that. Me right now, I'm working as the Southern Alberta History Archivist or the Glenbow Archivist at the University of Calgary. My job is working a lot with researchers, working a lot with donors, a lot of teaching, a lot of engagement, a lot of getting out there and doing some outreach for the archives. Uh, it was an interesting road to get here. I think maybe I'll chat more about that because I think we've hit some really good points on the resumes and the interviews and stuff. But I will talk about all of that too. I was born here in Calgary. I did my first degree at the University of Calgary in history. And then I went on to McGill to do my master's in information science or in information studies almost 10 years ago now, which is kind of crazy. But it was when it was first starting to be where you didn't have to pick a stream. It wasn't an MLIS, it wasn't an MAS. It was kind of both without doing that dual program. So it was new. It's not so new now. People are doing it. But those questions of like, is this practical? Are you getting enough training in both fields? Was a question I contended with when I was going to interviews. People were really asking me like, do you have the correct experience? Um, so I think I'm going to point back to what Weiwei said about talking about, um, connecting all of your experience, connecting it first. They're asking you these questions. You tell them what it is. What Sydney said too, right? All skills matter. Those soft skills you pick up in any job really help. So through my degree, I was fortunate to work at digital services at McGill. I got to have that experience. I did a short stint in the archives. I was working at Concordia as a student librarian. and I just exposed myself to as many options as I could. I didn't really know for sure what I wanted to do. I was pretty sure I wanted to work in community archives, but there are so many options with a versatile degree, and there's such a limited field um, to get those community archives jobs. When I graduated, I was first working remotely for a knowledge taxonomy company, and we were going into other community, like other companies and organizing their digital assets, which was an interesting avenue. It's something we could definitely go down. It wasn't a long-term job. It was a great job, don't get me wrong. But it wasn't what I wanted to be doing forever. And again, I kind of missed that connection with people and the research and the kind of things I loved about history and archives. And then I got a job at the Public Archives and Records Office of Prince Edward Island. And as I said, born and raised in Calgary, I was, living in Montreal, finishing my degree. I didn't think I could stay in Montreal. My French is a little bit more Parisian than Quebecois, so there's some politics at play. This summer, I was working for this taxonomy company. I was doing a lot of traveling. I moved home, and then I got to move all the way to PEI, right? I picked up all of my stuff in storage from my apartment that I was subletting in Montreal and just drove across the country, which I feel like I was very fortunate to do. I know we all can't just move for jobs, but the timing worked out. The community that I had, that I'd networked while I was in school, I had friends who were from the island. They connected me really well. So I think what Sydney said about networking is kind of key. You don't know who's going to help you, so ask everyone everything you can all of the time is my advice. Um, but right, I was perfect and I was set up. It was a short-term contract, which was kind of a risky move. I picked up my whole life and I moved and I learned how hard it is to be that far from home, right? That was the first Christmas I couldn't come home. Um, it was just, flights were $2,000 and I was a new graduate. Like what was I gonna do? And then, other family events started stacking up, and I was missing them and I was looking for a way to go back home. A job opened up at the Glenbow in their library, and I applied for that job and was able to move back to Calgary, which was fantastic. Um, and but again, starting brand new once again. And a few years into that job, the decision was decided to move the library and archives collections over to the University of Calgary, and I was being let go because there was no longer a library and archives at Glenbow. I was really fortunate after that to get a job at the University of Calgary as a reference specialist, which was fantastic. It was a good way to get a foot into academia, into the university. I met a lot of people. It was a collection I already knew. Because I had met a lot of the people at the University of Calgary, they knew me. So when I was interviewing for that job, I wasn't an unknown person, right? I kept those networks alive. So then I did that for a few years and a job opened up on the reference team or on the archivist team. And again, I had a lot of support in coming up to that job. So I feel like the number one thing I want everyone to take away is the power in those networks. And how important that is. When you're going to the interviews, I think Weiwei said it best, like research that company, right? We're all applying for a lot of jobs. Sometimes we're panic applying, we're going through everything. If you get the interview, make sure you know why you want to work there, why that's a good fit for you, right? You don't want a job because you need a job. You want that job because you're interested in this collection. You're interested in this community of people. You're interested in doing this type of work. And make sure it shows because they don't want just anybody. They want the right person there. And I would say the most important thing when you start a new job is looking for those hidden knowledge networks, right? We know who we report to directly. We know who our team members are. But what we don't know is why so and so in digital services is the exact right person to talk to about X, right? We don't know what we don't know. And you can kind of see it. You can see who people are asking, step back and watch and make sure that you're paying attention to where that information is found. I've seen a lot of people come in and say, "Oh, I don't need to talk to them. They're not on my team." And it's always to your detriment if you don't make those connections. Um, and I think right now, as you're prepping in school, is just to try and take advantage of all of those opportunities. Reach out, email everybody you can. Librarians love to talk about what they do. You can sometimes get an archivist to do it too. Um, which is just, I know who we are. Um, and I know that a lot of luck came on the way, but it was just a lot of trying and going and reaching out. And I think that's what's important is not to be afraid to try. And with that, I'll pass it on to Charlie.
Thanks, Kim. Um, Yeah, my name's Charlie Crittenden. I'm the Technology Services and Infrastructure Manager at the Northern Lights Library System. And there's been some great points made so far by the panelists. I'll try to kind of fill in the gaps, just talking about my experiences, but lots of great points so far. So if you're not familiar with Northern Lights, we're a regional library system that we're a member of TRAC, and we serve communities to the north and east of Edmonton, primarily rural libraries, some larger municipalities, some quite small communities, a whole range of different libraries out there that we're helping. And my role is to provide leadership for all matters related to technology for our libraries. And I'm quite new to the role. I've just been working here in this role for about 4 months, my first time being a manager in a library system. And I've had a lot to learn. It's been an interesting learning curve adjusting to the role. And prior to that, I was working as a librarian consultant for Northern Lights, which is kind of like a traveling librarian who had about 20 libraries there's about 50 plus libraries in Northern Lights. As the consultant, I had 20 that were kind of my libraries I was providing direct support to. I graduated in 2023 for my Master's of Library Studies, so I'm a relatively more recent graduate. And I'd worked at Edmonton Public Library for about 5 years before that point. As a matter of fact, so I'm 35 now. I actually graduated from my undergraduate degree back in 2011 with an undergraduate degree in English. And I really graduated with no clear plan of what I was doing or quite what my idea for life was. And I bounced around from different jobs. I ended up being a supervisor and a manager at different cafes. And I found that basically like the jobs from those times, even at the time, they didn't feel like they were adding up maybe to something. They were actually quite helpful in my later job applications and, resumes I was building for library work. So, from working at a cafe, especially as like a manager, I was learning helpful customer service skills or conflict resolution skills. I ended up working in bookstores actually, most notably at Audrey's Books in Edmonton. And I helped out with leading book launches, learning skills in public presentation and programming. And so those experiences added up to something in the end, even if at the time it felt like a winding path. And in 2018, I decided I was interested in pursuing a Master's of Library Studies, but I decided I wanted to get some experience at a library first. And so I applied for an adult page position at the Jasper Place branch in Edmonton and received that role. And then in 2019, applied for a library assistant role at EPL, which I received, and then worked as an LA for about 4.5 years before moving on to Northern Lights. And a few thoughts from that time period is that when I was going for this LA job, I never prepared so hard for an interview in my life, probably. And I spoke to sort of speaking about, as my fellow panelists have been saying about networking, I had gotten to know some of the library assistants and librarians in the system. And so I was asking them for advice for like common interview questions that might come up and, researching and learning more about the role to, understand. And that was really helpful because I was able to anticipate some questions and like prepare for them and think through them in advance. And I also really worked on sharpening up and building up my resume at that time period, which, looking back on my pre-2019 resumes, like they were really pretty bland and basic and just listing like I did this, I did that, and I worked on, this is maybe a bit overly granular advice, but just using more active language to basically toot my own horn a little bit more in my resume. And so using more active, like for example, like instead of saying I shelved books as a page, my resume said I progressively improved organizational abilities, attention to detail, and knowledge of library resources and sorting, processing, and shelving materials, which might be like an overly wordy way of saying I shelved books, but like it also, I think, did speak to the value I was providing, what I was learning, what I was doing. I kind of broke it down into more detail and made it more clear, like, I'm not just shelving books, like I'm engaged with this library as a whole and like what's going on. And I don't know, I think it worked out. I was able to get this role and really enjoyed being a library assistant, doing community outreach and leading different programs. And in 2020, I enrolled in the Master's of Library Studies and did it part-time over 3 years while I was working as an LA. Primarily at the Stanley Milner branch downtown. I learned a lot during this time with frontline library work and managing conflict, de-escalating stuff, responding to emergencies. It was a very interesting time. I felt like it's like a very real hands-on education and library work. And if I could speak on any advice from that time is that I tried to find opportunities to take on responsibilities and get new experiences beyond just my core job responsibilities, even though those were my primary focus. But if there's different opportunities to join a committee or get onto a team or kind of step up to take initiative within a team to try to make a difference or improve something, I would do that. So I was part of the Capital City Press team, working with local literature, part of the room bookings team, which is where I first met Cole as I was wrangling rooms for TAL in the downtown library. And I later found when I was having my first like librarian job interviews that those experiences were really helpful because even though I had my core library responsibilities gave me, for example, a lot of stuff I could say about customer service, responding to conflicts, providing library services, questions related to projects or working on different initiatives. I found that those sorts of committee-based work experiences were really helpful. And yes, as sort of in line with what some others have said, I sought to find mentors and sort of network to some extent. So just basically I just spoke to my managers and the librarians around me about what I was interested in doing and sought their advice, asked them questions, and found that to be really helpful actually to sort of guide what I was doing and how I was moving forwards. So in 2023, I finished my MLIS, applied for a variety of librarian jobs, no luck, and it was kind of a time I was just trying to figure out how I was going to move forwards. And during that time, I had a practice interview with a manager, which was really helpful. And just to quickly note, what was helpful about that is that I realized, I was sort of moving into a new area of job interviews where I was being asked about experiences I didn't really have yet. So, for example, a question was, tell us about a time you developed relationships with community organizations. I was like, well, I've never really had to do that. It's not part of my job duties. Or like, tell us about the time you took leadership on a project. Well, I've never really been a leader on a project because that's not my job role and stuff. But I found it's sort of very helpful to have that practice interview experience to come face to face with, okay, I got to figure this out. I got to maybe find new experiences or develop an approach to how I'll answer these. And I found like analyzing my responses to those questions, actually, I have had those experiences through volunteer experiences I've had with student groups, for example, where I have led a project, I have worked on something, I just never maybe thought about it that way. It didn't come to mind because I never had that question before. So I definitely would recommend, if at all possible, having practice interview situations with friends or with mentors, whatever the case may be. To quickly wrap up, in 2023, at the end of the year, I applied for this librarian consultant role at Northern Lights and worked in that role for about 9 months. And I can speak more about that if you're curious, but basically it's this a traveling librarian type role where I was working remotely. I'm based here in Edmonton, but traveling out to the headquarters of the library system, which is out past St. Paul in a place called Elk Point, and visiting libraries throughout the year, but largely working from home, providing support remotely. And basically just being kind of the one providing answers to anything under the sun for any sort of topic that might come up. So it's like very educational, early librarian experience for basically any topic that a library might encounter. And then if you're curious, I can speak more in the question answer period about my current role as a TSI manager. But definitely it's been an interesting experience adapting to or learning how to be a good manager. I have 2 staff reporting to me who are sort of like IT support technicians. And I would say the biggest learning curve has just been developing project management skills and working on these bigger projects and working on different timelines to stay on top of it. And I would say, oh, I'm at my time. Final thought I'd say is just that, like, I think as I was getting started, if I could go back or if, the main lesson I learned, which is like not getting totally caught up in day-to-day details every single day, but to be able to also zoom out and just look at the bigger picture of what was going on. I think when I started the role, I was like, all right, just got to get things done. And I found since it's important to take some time each day or each week just to zoom out and look at the bigger picture of like these different projects that are playing on their timelines to make sure I'm staying on top of them. I'll leave it there and look forward to any questions you might have. I'll pass it on to Larissa.
Hanse, everyone. My name is Larissa McLeod, and I am a third-generation library worker, actually, and a member of the James Smith Cree Nation. So I came into library land I first of all got a Bachelor of Arts, double majoring in anthropology and French language and literature. And definitely wasn't going to go into librarianship because my dad had just finished his MLIS and had been in the field for like a decade already. And I was like, cool, big shoes to fill, and he's filling them. I'm good. I'll find something else. At the time, I was very drawn to government because I really liked procedure and policy and all of those kind of aspects. So I actually went and worked for government, municipal government for about 2 years. And I believe my job title was something like information officer in the office of the city clerk. But in reality, what I was the person that if any counselors had questions about, hey, when was the last time we talked about bike lanes at committee or council? I was the one who went and found that, or questions about what are all the bylaws that relate to signage. I'd go and gather that. Usually myself and I had a colleague that we worked on pretty similar scopes, so we tended to work together on a lot of stuff. So interestingly enough, not a position that required a library technician degree or an MLIS, but very information centric. It was even to the point where I was working on freedom of information and protection of privacy um, training. Like I not only took training, but then was the person doing training for other city workers. I was even learning how to do freedom of information requests and do the redactions and all of that. Um, so about 2 years into that, I was starting to realize, golly gee, I care a lot about information policy and how people access information and the way that they do it. I probably should maybe get a degree in this. And I was lucky enough to have a manager who also pulled me aside, happened to have an MLIS and was like, I think this might be the right area for you. My dad, who had been in the field at that point for like 15 years, was like, wasn't gonna say it, but I told you so. Actually, he's never said I told you so, but he knew. He knew in his heart of hearts. And so I decided to look at an MLIS, but it was very important for me. I wanted a program that was going to give me the information to know how to best talk about managing information, but also to talk about managing people, because I already knew that leadership and management was also very important to me. So that's why I chose Masters of Library and Information Studies. Um, During that time, I actually worked as an intern for the University of Alberta Libraries while I was completing my degree. After I finished that, I went on to do a maternity leave coverage for Norquest College, so very academic centric. And then I came to work at the Alberta Library, which Cole kind of gave you a little bit of information about what we do here. So my role here now is I primarily take care of the public library and K to 12 licensing negotiation side of things. I also do a couple other things like curriculum mapping of books to the K to 12 curriculum for the Alberta government, or not for the Alberta government, but to the Alberta programs of study from the Book Publishers Association of Alberta. Um, and yeah, done a couple other things, including co-teaching a class for the School of Library and Information Studies with my dad, actually. So it's very funny how cyclic your career path can actually sometimes be. Um, a lot of the co-presenters, they mentioned exactly what I was going to bring up in terms of advice. So I'm just going to kind of try and hit on some highlights. I really liked the comments that were made about when it comes to interviews, looking for ways to show, don't tell. So, I mean, you're still telling, but we don't want you to say, yes, I'm really good at managing multiple priorities. We want you to say, here's an example of a time where I managed multiple priorities and here's how I did it. Or here's what I learned from that. Or here's an area I've decided to grow because of my experience with that. Those are the kind of things that I really note when I'm in interviews that showcases to me you're not only able to see what is the skill we're asking for, but what that skill looks like in practice. And that actually matters a lot more. Anyone can say, I'm really good at this or that, but whether or not they actually are, that's in practice. I completely agreed with Weiwei comments around, I think it was Weiwei and Sydney who were mentioning things about customizing your resume to your applications. That is hugely important. I would also recommend, especially for folks who, like, if you're rather early on in your career still, I would recommend start a master resume. So this is the resume that you're going to put literally every certification, every experience that you get. This is not going to be the one you ever submit, but it's going to be where you keep compiling. Because I can tell you, it's only been about 8 years since I finished my degree. But if you actually keep track of that stuff, you're going to find you have a ton of material that then you have this master resume you can come back to when you're putting in for an application, where you're able to say, oh, I think I have a certificate that would relate to that, or I think I did a presentation that would be really good for highlighting this particular skill, or knowledge base. So I'd highly recommend create kind of a master resume that is a shared document on whatever your most, you know, cloud and safe drive is, that is just going to be with you forever. And then every resume that you create is just a version of that. In terms of settling in the first month, I can put the link to a book that's called The First 90 Days, by Michael D. Watkins. It's an excellent resource, especially if maybe there's not a ton of information on the onboarding in your actual organization. It's a pretty generic one, but I mean, it wouldn't be a library panel if there wasn't at least one book recommendation, right? But I also would say, and take this with a grain of salt, but I'd actually recommend Google your colleagues. And I'm not saying in a stalkery way, but we tend to put a lot of information out there. And so if you find out one of your colleagues is like a huge Adam Sandler fan, you can connect with them personally on, hey, by the way, I watched this Adam Sandler movie. It was super cool. I think I saw that you run an Adam Sandler blog, and you can engage with them as a person so that when you have to go to them and say, hey, I need help figuring out this process, you're able to feel less like you're a weight on that person and more like, hey, colleague, buddy, friend of mine. So it gives you more opportunities and hooks to be able to engage with them. So I'll pass it on.
Uh, Thanks, Larissa. So my name's Christian. I am the User Services Coordinator at the Reg Earhart Library at SAIT here in Calgary. And by User Services Coordinator, I mostly just mean I'm responsible for public service. We have a setup in our library where most of our staff work on the front desk at least a little bit each week. Not all the people who work the desk report to me, but I'm responsible for sort of the policies and procedures and that stuff related to public service. How I kind of got to this is, well, I've always kind of liked libraries. I spent a lot of time at Village Square Library in Calgary as a kid. I worked as a library page for Calgary Public Library when I was in high school for a bit. But I didn't really see libraries as a career. I actually saw theater as a career, and that was a mistake. Not a mistake, but I found when I started studying theater seriously as like a professional discipline in university that it probably wasn't the place that I wanted to make my career path. So a little futzing around for a decade or so, and then I came to SAIT in 2000 and graduated from our library technology program in 2002. While I was at SAIT, I really wanted to, because I didn't have library experience, which as we've heard is not uncommon for people entering the profession or recently graduated, but I really wanted to build some up. So I did get a job as a shelver here at the SAIT Library, and I did that for about a year while I was a student. I also spent some time at what is now Libraries and Cultural Resources, working on their digitization project. So I helped digitize what is now the online local histories collection. I was part of that first wave of digitization that they did in the early, around 2000, 2001. I also worked a summer internship at Libraries and Archives Canada. That was through a program that I'm not 100% sure still exists, but there used to be a federal work experience program, and you'd apply to a job in the federal government, and then they would fly you to wherever that job is located. So I spent the summer in living in Ottawa and working in Gatineau Hall at Libraries and Archives Canada. Yeah. And then after I graduated from the LIT program in 2002, I got a job again here at State Library, working evenings and weekends, staffing our information desk. That was because our library was not open evenings and weekends through the spring and summer semesters. So for a few years there, I would work evenings, 4 nights a week plus a Saturday or a Sunday, for 4 months or 8 months, September to April, and then I'd be laid off for 4 months. And then I'd come back the following September, be laid off in April. I did that for a few years, but it actually worked pretty well for me because I kind of did a reverse university schedule, and I did a whole bunch of classes to finish up my degree, which I ended up getting a BA in comms, communication and culture, by taking spring summer courses when I wasn't working, basically. Okay. After a few years working evenings and weekends, maternity leave position opened up on days. So I moved to daytime here. And in the course of that maternity leave, the library hired a web development and kind of digital services librarian, which is a new role for us. And I kind of glommed onto her and said, I can help with web stuff. Did I know how to do websites? Not really. You got to remember, this is like, 2005-ish or so. And so at that time, the kind of WYSIWYG tools that are maybe more commonplace now that kind of make it easier to do library websites were not broadly available or just didn't exist yet. And we wanted to create a website that was sort of independent from SAIT's kind of big website management, so we could be like a little more responsive and handle our own stuff, we thought, more effectively. So, but I did have a little bit. We spent maybe 2 weeks in the second year of the LIT program learning a few basics of HTML and stuff. So, as I think some people have alluded to already, I just kind of put myself forward and said, I'm interested in this. I know a teensy little bit about it, but I'm really eager to learn. And from that, over a year or so later, once that new website was built and things, they needed someone to do the day-to-day maintenance and that. And so they created a web development technician role. That was a permanent job, and that was my first permanent job at the State Library. Okay? And I sort of tell you all that just to highlight that you can spend a lot of time in sort of this perdition of like casual and term contract work, and that can be challenging because that makes you maybe feel a little financially insecure. You gotta wonder if it's worth sticking it out at this place, if you like it, and I did like SAIT and people seem to like me, or if you should jump ship and try somewhere else where you can maybe make a bit more progress or get that permanent position. And that can be a really tough call. At that time, I had a family, I had a young child. But fortunately for me, they kept offering opportunities to me, and maybe I'd have to interview for those sometimes because they were opportunities that were required to go to open competition, but I was known and I was well liked, so I had pretty good confidence that I could move into those roles. And even from that initial permanent position as a web development technician, my role evolved. They added another person to the team, and I ended up supervising them for a bit. Okay. And then after that, our librarian who dealt with public service resigned, and I was offered a chance to move out of the web team and into public service. And I did that 6 or 7 years ago, and I've really enjoyed that, you know. So I think my story is one of just looking for opportunity and not uh, not claiming skills or aptitudes you don't have, but just putting yourself forward to say you're interested in these opportunities. You know, if you know someone's leaving, you know, just drop a little note to the manager saying, hey, I'd be interested in even a bit of their portfolio. Maybe you're not interested in their whole job, but often when someone leaves, the organization takes that opportunity to reassess, you know, their workload and the tasks they do and stuff. And maybe they're open to reassigning some part of that job to a new person. Okay. I do a lot of hiring in this role. I hire a lot of new graduates and students. So I'm not going to reiterate a bunch of the stuff that people have said already, but I do really want to hit on, I think it's a word that Sydney used, but empathy, especially for the jobs I hire in public service, really looking for people who can listen empathetically. We have a wide variety of users at all our libraries. They come from different backgrounds, that some have more or less awareness of how our systems work, not just the system in the library, but the whole bigger institution you might be part of. And so listening with empathy and doing your best to support people is really, really important. Okay. Yeah, and then I think another really important thing to hit is when you're in that interview, being prepared to ask good questions. The best questions I've had are, you know, what do I like about working here? What's the work culture like in this at our library? And what do I find challenging in my own work? And I think those are really great questions because that shows like an engagement and an interest in what we do and our place and stuff. But it also shows that you're looking for fit yourself. Like I'm always looking for a person who's a great fit. And I hope that the person I'm interviewing wants to feel that we're a good fit for them as well. And it's not just a job where they show up at a particular time and leave at a particular time and collect some pay. Okay? And I think that's my time, but I hope there's questions I can engage with. And thanks again to Cole for organizing this and having me. Okay?
Hi.
Sorry, and I'm passing it on to Cheryl.
Thank you, Kristen. That's a wonderful introduction. So just looking around the screen here, it looks like I'm the oldest. I know that I'm the least qualified, and I know that I've had the best job ever for the past 38 years. I am the director of a small town public library. I was fortunate enough to be one of the 100 people that mattered in the first 100 years of library service. I was also pleased to be featured in a journal article, the very first journal put out by the U of A or the university. I can't remember what it was called, but I am Cheryl Pelche, vibrant librarian from High Level, Alberta, currently of Sexsmith, Alberta, which, by the way, it's a location, not a career. But moving along, I started when the most valuable tools in the library were a typewriter and catalog cards. A whiteout pencil. The best thing that happened to us was the invention of a photocopier because you could photocopy the cards before you had to type all the headings on. We moved from 8 boxes of poorly filed cards to a full shelf list of our library. You guys don't even know what a shelf list is anymore. We used to have celebratory burnings of those back in the day, around about 2000. I've seen the whole evolution of library work from that time to now. And you would think that the biggest evolution was with internet, but I truly believe it's the next stage because the battle is harder that you guys are going to face. You're facing misinformation where lies are believed sooner than anything else, when anything you read is got to be true. Where every bit of valid information is hidden behind paywalls. When you can't, the only way you can access this stuff, person sitting at home on their computer, is with a library card, being able to go in and look in at reputable services. But more and more, those are being priced out of the market of small libraries and the library systems that we rely on for our help. Charlie, I commend you. You're a consultant. I love my consultant. But just remember, if you choose to be a consultant, never walk into a small library and assume the librarian doesn't know anything. Okay? We know a hell of a lot more than you think we do. 80%, and Cole, you've heard me say this before, but 80% of the libraries in Alberta are in communities under 10,000 people. That means we're learning by the seat of our pants, and that we count on people to be our mentors. And here I get to name drop people like Ernie Ingalls, Penny McKee, Keith Turnbull, Pilar Martinez are amazing people, and they're out there and they will mentor you in a second. You just have to be not scared to talk to them. So like someone I think was talking about is building your contacts. I'm sure it was Sydney, because Sydney had a lot of wisdom in what she was saying. Build your contacts. They can be anywhere. They can be among the vendors that you run into at a library conference. Talk to them about what they do. They don't care that they're not selling you anything. That doesn't matter. They just want to get their message out there. So that means that people like encyclopedia salesmen, what's an encyclopedia? Nobody even knows anymore. It can be some of the most valuable connections that you have. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do it. There's a position or a set of books called the Tuttle Twins. And if anybody knows them, they're from a right-wing think tank out of Utah. And I had a library patron that wanted to have them in my library, and I didn't want to add them, but we are freedom of information, etc., etc. So it was Pilar Martinez that I went to years after I met her and said, "Hi, it's Cheryl. Can you help me?" And she did. And those are the people that we need in our lives, because we can phone them anytime we want. I know now that I can phone Cole anytime I need to set up a Zoom meeting. He'll tell me how. Some things I really want to focus on. Sydney, you mentioned Girl Guides. Girl Guides was how I got my first job, because a Girl Guide leader has shown empathy with children, can do active programming, can build enthusiasm again among an awkward age of girls, and is a skill set that's worth having. What else have we got here? When you first start a job, ask questions. I've been to a lot of employees in 35 years, 38 years, whatever it's been. Ask questions. When you don't ask questions, your boss gets nervous. So ask. When you ask questions of the people you work with, you build trust with them, because they know that you're not going to just assume and do things like move all of the books off of the bottom shelf up higher so all the shelves are packed in full. And then somebody has to go and fix all of those. But the assumption was that it was the right thing to do. Take time to be in the moment. Listen to people. And that's my biggest flaw, is I don't listen enough. I talk too much and I say too much, and I usually swear. Don't minimize your other experience. I've been making notes as I'm going. Smile. Show that you understand. One of the things, after I did a session at the Stronger Together session, one of the things that was quoted back to me, or I overheard quoted, and was that in small libraries, we are bartenders for sober people. And that's because of our empathy. When they come into a small town library, and when they come into any library where they feel comfortable, we're the one place where they know they can talk safely and they can hear safely. It's a sad part about the Valley View and the Fifth Estate episode on that, was their whole loss of the coalition, because it is a safe place. And it's a place that, coalition, Gay Alliance coalition. And having the community strike out against that is hurtful. And that's another part that's going to be the hardest part to go into. I urge all of you guys, think of us in small town libraries. Think of it as being that place where you can gather the experience, so that you can go out and join a library system and be one of the best consultants you'll ever see, because you know what it's like on the ground. We do everything here. if you get a job you love, you never have to work another day in your life. And I haven't worked in 38 years. I'm done. I have no real other things to say other than just be yourself when you're in an interview and smile lots. Cole, I'll pass it back to you. You were probably wise to leave me to the end, because otherwise I would have just interrupted everybody.
Fair. I also knew you would have some fun phrases to share, so I wanted to put that right in the middle of the event. Thank you so much, everybody. That went perfectly, beautifully. I liked the synergy between all of your answers, which helps us all kind of see that there is a regularity to a lot of what you need to do and a lot of what you can do. It's not a ton of millions of different types of things. You can kind of hyper focus on certain aspects. But there are little things. If you have different, different experiences, different things you want, there are little things you can do. So we have about half an hour for questions. I see there's a question thing, but I did want to add a couple little things of my own. Secret panelist number 8. One of the things Larissa talked about was a master resume. That's a great idea. One of the things that I had that also way brought up, which is having a good cover letter that is specific to each job. Once you start hating cover letters because they kind of suck. They take a really long time forever. But if you're a nerd, which I assume all of you are, because that's sort of important to being a librarian, you can start. What I started doing is putting pieces of my cover letter into certain categories. So if you want to, you'll start seeing like things that are in certain jobs, like you want detail oriented or big picture thinking. You'll just take those paragraphs you wrote and stick them in, and then every time you start seeing that in resume or in job applications, you can just copy paste and just make like franking cover letters. I would say that is great. Also, Sydney talked about this, is figuring out interview questions ahead of time, looking them up, or using AI, which I love that we're there. Once you start having a bunch of interviews, like I had however many interviews, like Christian talked about this. I was in contracts for 7 years after my MLIS, so I had interviews. After every interview, I would use a voice recorder. You could type it, and I would just like say as many of the questions as I could remember into a voice recorder after. And then I started a master list, again, nerd, collocating all those questions and then just writing down my answers so that you would just have a massive list of what anybody could ever ask. Because you also start noticing that job interviewers are not that creative. There's a lot of similar questions. They might be worded slightly differently, but one of the biggest skills you can have in interviews for me is can you tailor your questions? Can you explain your experiences in any way? Can you adapt them? Because if you can adapt almost any of your experiences to almost any question, in my experience. And yeah, okay, so that was my little bit. So we're gonna start the Q&A. What I'm gonna do is I'll read the questions and then I will just read it to the panel. And if you guys want to put your hand up or like physically put your hand up, I'll just call on you and you can answer it. Let's see what I have here. Oh, people answered Danny's question in the in the thing, so I'll just leave that one. But I have some questions from the Google form. So this one's interesting. My grades aren't so great, just average, around 75%. How will my transcript affect my job application? I also failed 2 courses at a time when my mother died after the add drop period. And how will these failed courses affect my chances at getting a decent job? Christian, hopefully that was your hand for this question.
Yeah, I'm the king of failed courses, especially if you look at my university transcripts. It's full of F's and W's. I was actually at university for a very long time. And I would say not at all. No one asks for that until after you have an offer. And then it's part of proving that you have the credential that's expected for that position, is to present your transcripts or your diploma. But in my experience, both as someone who does a lot of hiring, particularly of new grads, as I said, and as someone who, when is in that stage of my career and is doing a lot of interviews, nobody asked what my grades were. Nobody asked, did I ever fail out or have to repeat a class? Nobody cares. If you've got that diploma, people presume that you have a certain baseline of knowledge. And honestly, but this does remind me of one thing I don't think anyone touched on. Please check or have someone check the grammar in your resume and cover letter. That's maybe where if you're not like, I don't know, if academia and writing is not your strong suit and you struggle with that aspect of your program, um, then that might come through in your cover letter or your resume, and that might be a challenge for people who are deciding who to bring in for interviews. So really make sure that those are really clean. Okay, thanks.
I think Wei, I think I saw your hand, but I see you're also typing an answer. So whoa, nice.
Yeah, I wanted to also say I don't think we've ever checked transcription from anyone when we're doing hiring. And I came from a very different educational background. I struggled through my master's because that was my first year into a different country, using different language, learning different things. I struggled a lot and it was not glory in any sense, but nobody has ever asked that. So put that to ease. But I remember though, at the very end of my program, I went to, at the university, they have career services. So they actually help you to go through your resume and cover letters. I sit down with someone to even went through every punctuation in my cover letter and resume and actually got some comment. I think the first job I applied to say I was one of the better formatted resume that's being received. So just to say details actually sometimes matters too.
Thank you. Yeah, totally. Okay, what do we want to do this here? There's another question here, a wordy question. We love those. That's great. I'm interested in working as a school library technician. I've spoken to two very good and informative individuals working within schools in and out of Edmonton. And one key point they advised was to prove your worth as a library technician and/or the school benefits greatly from having a library technician. Is there any advice in regarding to that? Larissa.
So first thing I'd recommend is check if there is associations or organizations that are gatherings of school librarians, because they will have expertise in that area. So whether you're remaining here in Alberta or moving elsewhere, broadly on a national scale, there is the Canadian School Library Association, I believe it is. But maybe look for one more local, depending on where you end up. Because, of course, those folks will have really great advice that is also very, very localized. They might even know some of the key players that you're going up against and have specific recommendations about your situation or your particular environment. The other thing would be some folks were mentioning in terms of resume, looking at the strategic plan. That's definitely something I would do in terms of proving worth. When you're in a job position, being able to very clearly state how the work that you do directly connects to things like strategic plans or any sort of official documentation that is effectively an organizational promise of this is what we will do. That is a very key thing to link to, especially when a budget season comes around and there's the question of, well, couldn't we just like charge for every book that people take out and then we could get money? Being able to explicitly connect the things that they say the organization does and the work that you do will make it a lot easier for them to see you as part of their team rather than you as something they should cut. I hope that helps.
Thank you. We'll do the other one that's in here because even if Wei does answer this, it's sort of for everybody. Were there any specific programs, conferences, learning opportunities that you sought out post graduation that helped you in your current career? Cheryl, you're on it.
Well, there used to be something called the Library Conference of Alberta, and that was held in Jasper every year, and it was probably one of the best. I'm not that I have a lot of conference experience, but I've heard that it was one of the best conferences in North America. It was where I met almost all of my mentors, all of the people that I had associations with, because I could sit at a table and meet them. So that's my recommendation. If you are at a conference, don't sit with your friends, sit at a table of strangers and introduce yourself, meet them and meet them on their level, and be interested in what they have to say. They'll remember you. And especially there is something called Stronger Together that I hope will become the new Alberta Library Conference. And with any luck, that can be the same type of rewarding endeavor that the library, the big one, gave me every year. It also gave me the energy to buckle back under and go back and work harder.
Thanks, Cheryl. Kim?
Thanks. I would agree 100% with Cheryl about those library conferences and going out and professionally networking with your colleagues. But something that I found really important was going out to the other groups that aren't directly related to libraries and archives. So I'm a member of a lot of history groups at national, provincial, and municipal levels because they are interested in what archives have to say and they want to hear from us. So it's a great opportunity if you want to get a lot of conference experience, if you don't have any, to not try and say, oh, I'm going to go to a library conference and talk about libraries as a new grad, but I'm going to take one of my other interests and I'm going to go talk to the historians about history. And I'm going to talk about how that ties into librarianship and my profession. And that looks great on your resume. And then that also is a good building blocks for someone like me who, I have my history archivist is in my title most of the time, right? It's because I have these connections with the communities outside of the library that really helped. But the flip to that is, right, like a lot of archives, I think it's like 1.2 persons are fully employed in most archives outside of a university. So going to those conferences, making those connections, like Cheryl said, like you have to go and meet your people, and it's so fulfilling and rewarding to do that. But also make sure you're doing both. Find that balance, and going outside of what you think you should be doing to talk about what you do somewhere else really comes back and benefits you down the road.
Thanks, Kim. So there was a question in the question and answer about two like LGBT stuff, but since that's not necessarily about interviews and stuff, I'm gonna leave that one to be answered on the text. Like just type your answer because I still have a couple more questions for more the focus. So one that I find interesting and what hasn't been touched on is can you offer some advice to older applicants age 60 years and above, also queer, female, or BIPOC with no library experience who are competing with a much younger pool of applicants? So this would be a good question for people who do like hiring and stuff like that.
Sorry, could you repeat that for me? I was reading something in the question.
All good. Can you offer some advice to older applicants age 60 years and above, also queer, female, and BIPOC, with no library experience who are competing with a much younger pool of applicants?
I can speak to that a bit. Because I've hired, like I've said many times, usually if I'm doing hiring, it's new grads, but those graduates are not necessarily young. We've hired people, I don't know if we've hired someone in their 60s who just graduated, but certainly in their early 50s. We've hired new Canadians who maybe actually don't even have like a library technician diploma, but uh, but they have library experience in their home country, and their education there just doesn't closely map onto technician versus librarian as we sort of divide it up here. So I think those opportunities are there, and that you just got to put your best foot forward, just like any other candidate.
Sure. Thanks, Christian.
Age related. Go in there telling them the skills that you're bringing to the position and your willingness to share what you've learned as a succession planner. Because often people leave an agency or an organization and they've left a big hole where nobody knows and all those skills that were built up. So if you're older, go in with the aspect of, yes, I know I'm older, but look at what I have to give, and stress those things that you've accumulated that interest in. I'm old and I'm retiring this year. And one of the things I'm looking for is hopefully starting a business called Shh Happens, a library temp agency for small libraries. I don't know whether it'll work or not. We'll have to see. I might not have the energy by the time I retire, but if you see an advertisement or see my business card around, make sure you refer me. Just watch for it. SHHH exclamation point happens.
I love that. Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, there's one in the chat here. How much, if any, does AI factor into your jobs? Anything from patrons asking or courses that are offered for you as libtechs or librarians? Sydney.
For patrons asking, it does happen quite often, especially at our front service desks or on chat, especially at an academic setting where they're like, can I use it? Like, will my prof be mad at me? And so we're lucky at University of Calgary, we have Kaylee, which is the Center of Artificial Intelligence Literacy, and there's another I word on the end of that. But they provide a lot of workshops and resources for students on AI. So we're usually guiding them to that. I don't think kind of like medical or law. No one expects you to be an expert or to give concrete advice on AI when there's so much surrounding it, especially in academics. But guiding them to resources like that is usually the extent of my job. And then for courses that are offered, there are so many courses offered on AI. It feels like every month there's an AI related something in any conference you go to, there's AI something. So lots of courses offered and lots of questions at the desk at our service points in academics.
Great, thank you. I was typing now. So, okay, how about, I noticed some job postings are asking for PhD/publications, Red Cross certifications, social work degree, driver's license, instead or alongside a library degree. Can you offer any insight into regarding extra qualifications? I feel like that I would be good for jobs, especially ask for a social work degree, but I don't have one. That kind of thing.
I can
Or-
start off here. Sometimes there might be additional qualification that is a requirement. For example, if part of your job would actually require driving the library van, they may require a special driver license. Most job application or job postings try to be pretty good about dividing between required and like recommended or preferred. And those are the things that it's like, it would be nice if you had. Um, I would not use those to count yourself out. If you look at the required pieces of a job and think, yeah, I could do that. And then you look at the like recommended and are like, I'm not sure, but the rest of the job posting, you really think, yeah. It still could be very well worth it for you to apply. Worst case scenario, you're not the best candidate and you're not in the top few that get called in for an interview. You do then gain the experience of yet another customized resume and customized cover letter. You gain a little bit more understanding of what potential other assets or future certifications you might want to look at getting if you see like your dream job and you're like, oh, interesting, it requires a certificate in HR. Huh. And even if you don't get that particular job, if you start seeing that as a repetitive recommended asset for the jobs that you're like really drawn to, well, you might have just found a potential growth area for your own career. So, don't count yourself out. But, yeah, take a look at whether it says it's a recommended or a required piece.
Thanks, Larissa. Charlie?
Yeah, just thinking about the specific query related to social work, like I'm sure if you had a social working background, you would be like a superstar community librarian, for example, like that would be very helpful to you in that work. But like I think that there's a lot of skills you can gather through more general library work or other like adjacent experiences, like what we've talked about so far with like sort of softer skills, like, looking for empathy as like a core skill in like library work or like being able to relate to people or interact or what have you. Like for me, working as like a library assistant, like downtown, I had a lot of stuff where I was referring people to social workers as helping provide the initial contact that was like entailing some of those skills. But to me, like I was able to do that job well just through like more soft skills of building relationships and connections and demonstrating empathy and like helping them find solutions and then referring them on to the experts. So I don't think you always have to be like the expert in an area to be the one who's like helpful in a library context, if that makes sense, just like to know enough to be able to like relate to them and help them find the right path. And like, don't be like, I would definitely, I've interacted with people like one of my fellow library assistants had a nursing background and we all felt like she was a superstar to have around, like really helpful, but like at the same time, there's no expectation for library assistants to be having nursing skills. That's too much. Like if there's an emergency, you're calling an ambulance anyways, right? Like, so, or whatever. So, just some thoughts, I guess, that like to think about the library related, like, be able to respond to an emergency and know when to call an ambulance. That's important, but like to be have a nursing background, not necessarily. So I think sometimes it's just like at the library level, you're the one referring or providing support and directing onwards. Does that make sense? With that said, a driver's license is pretty helpful. Like for my current job, it is required to drive around and sort of thing. So.
Thanks. Just my own opinion. You don't need to have a car and you don't need to drive a lot, but everyone should have a driver's license. Just in case of emergencies. Anyway, so we have about 4 minutes left. There's this one question which I like because I like, what have you learned from any failure that you've encountered? What's like your biggest regret? But I'd like the focus to be on like, what did you learn from that? The one that I have, if nobody has one right now, is one that's good for life as well, is if you make mistakes, even if they're massive, tell someone immediately. Like you have it, people have that natural, like, I need to hide it. I want to fix it by myself. I want to like, get it away so no one sees that I failed. Someone's gonna find out. That's that you can't hide it. You should just tell someone. They're gonna actually like that more in a weird way because they'll say you're not gonna try to hide it. You're not gonna try to kind of cover it up and mess it up worse a lot of the time. Because you're gonna make these mistakes very early on too, and you might not know what you're messing up.
It's
Um,
okay to say, I don't know. It's
totally.
perfectly okay.
That's another one of those huge things that where it's a soft skill. Lots of people can't, it's hard for people to like apologize, say I don't know, whatever, that kind of stuff. That's huge in librarianship. Christian.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on that about owning your mistakes. I think that's a big thing. A thing that I did here once is we have study rooms that students can book, and they're in very high demand. They're booked uh, basically all through the day, several days in advance. And some years ago, we were having like some technical issues with it, and I was showing an outside IT professional how our system worked, like on the admin end. I was showing him features, and we turned this off and this, yada yada yada. And I turned off something because I just wanted to show him, this is part of what we do and how it's all set up. And then I never turned it back on, and the system just broke. Like it just didn't work anymore. And we couldn't figure out why for like 2 or 3 days. And then I was just like looking at it again and being like, oh God, what's this thing? What happened? Why does this suck so much? And then I saw it's just one little toggle button. I switched it to on, and everything was fine again instantly. And, I felt a little dumb and I felt bad because it created hassle for my colleagues who are working frontline and, created problems for students who couldn't book study rooms and all this stuff. So I just sent an email saying, hey, gang, great news. I figured it out and it's fixed. Also, totally my fault. My bad. I'm sorry. And the only thing I got from my manager was a laughing emoji because she just thought it was so funny that it was just such a dumb little thing and was grateful that it was fixed, you know? So I've always been one who, takes ownership of my mistakes. I don't mind being critiqued by my colleagues or my manager. And it's not to say I always agree with them or I always immediately make the change they think I should make. But I always take that stuff in and consider it. And that was, the first time not the only time, but probably the first time I kind of failed that publicly with that important resource. And I've just always kind of held on to that, it's okay to fail if you're in a healthy environment. People understand that happens, and they are more concerned with getting the problem fixed than, some mistake or some error that you made. Thanks.
That's like, there's a book called Question Behind the Question, and I just put it in there. And it's about personal accountability. And when working with board members and board chairs and all of those people who have the ability to fire you on the spur of a moment, which is an exhausting job to have sometimes for 35 or whatever, 38 years, is I no longer blame. I look at what I can do to affect change as opposed to making somebody else do it. It's not my treasurer's job to change how she behaves towards me. It's up to me to figure out a way to get the kind of treatment I want. I'm not saying it very well because I haven't thought it out enough, but it's my job to come up with the right answer.
Thanks, Cheryl. Larissa, I think you had your hand up and you can have the final word.
Okay, it'll be really quick because it's a failure specifically related to applying for jobs. When I was getting my bachelor's degree, I waited a really long time to apply for jobs because I thought I needed to have the certificate to apply for the jobs that needed it. Do not make that mistake. That was so silly. When it came to getting my MLIS, I think I started applying for jobs at the end of my second to last term. Like it it was like 5 months out from getting my degree. And really because some like academia sometimes does not move fast. You don't know how long it's actually going to take for them to fill that position. It could be like a multi-month situation. And I have actually seen it where if you just are the right person for the job and they really want you, they might bring you on in like a part-time capacity while you finish up your final, classes, um, with like so long as you complete your degree, we'll hire you full time. I have seen that happen. It's not super common, so don't like assume that happens everywhere all the time. But um, it's also really nice because you can definitely get rid of your like initial interview jitters in those initial interviews. And then when you're like really hardcore applying as you're really wrapping up your degree, you're ready to go. You're all warmed up. So please don't make that mistake because I definitely did in my bachelor's degree and I kind of regret it. I wonder where I could have ended up. Although I'm happy with where I ended up now, but learn from my mistake, please.
Thanks, Larissa. Yeah, so it's 4:32 now, so that's the end of it basically. But one thing I will say, if you have any further questions, I'm sure any of these lovely people would be happy to answer it. You can use your powers of research that you've been learning in school to find their names on the internet and probably find their emails. Or if you want, you can go to thealbertalibrary.ca. If you scroll to the bottom, we have a support email. You can ask me, I'll ask them. Nice telephone. But again, thank you so much to all our lovely panelists to hang out at the end of the workday and talk shop, sort of. And yeah, thank you everyone, all you lovely people that stayed for the whole thing. And again, we were recording it. I will send it to all the registrants, regardless of if you were here or not. And yeah, very wonderful. Thank you all so much. And have a great end of your Monday.